Trans ideology is everywhere these days. It's taken over the police, the health service, and even schools. We talk about it constantly, but the finer points of this ideology and its history are still not widely understood. Most of us know the basics, such as the bizarre idea that a man can become a woman just by saying so. But you probably don't know about the dark, sinister roots of these ideas. Many of them can even be traced back to one man and a sick medical experiment that he conducted.
You are going to be riveted to this story you're about to hear. It is the ultimate in that you can't make somebody be something they're not. It is known in the medical community as the John Joan case. It is the story of a baby boy.
Dr. John Money was a New Zealand-born sexologist and pioneer in the field of sexuality and gender. In 1955, he was the first person to use the word gender to draw a distinction between biological sex and what we now call gender identity. In fact, you can thank Money for giving us the term gender identity. He opened the world's first gender identity clinic in Baltimore in 1966, and he popularised the ideas that are central to today's trans movement, particularly the deranging notion that our biological sex doesn't necessarily determine whether we are male or female. And yet, the trans movement of today is squeamish when it comes to talking about Dr. Money. You won't find him cited in any Stonewall guidelines, or see him quoted in any Mermaids documents. The reason for this is simple. John Money's work was creepy, cruel, and amoral, and it left a trail of misery, pain, and suicide in its wake. Money's ideas about gender came mostly from his experimentation on intersex babies. That is, the minuscule proportion of children who are born with neither definitively male nor female sex characteristics. He developed a treatment for these babies that involved directing or streaming them into one specific gender as soon as possible. To do this, he would surgically alter the baby's genitalia and give them hormones. For Money, it didn't matter which gender was chosen. The most important thing was that the babies were raised exclusively as the gender that had been chosen for them. Even until relatively recently, this was thought to be the best way to treat intersex infants. But Money wasn't just interested in intersex children. As an essay in Salon points out, Money was more interested in applying his theories about gender to all children. He wanted to prove that any infant could be transitioned into the opposite gender, provided the process began early enough. His attempts to do so came at a tremendously high cost for one family in particular. Obviously, no parent would allow their perfectly healthy baby to be streamed into the opposite gender and undergo needless and invasive medical treatments, all to prove one doctor's weird theories. But then David Reimer fell into Money's hands. Much of what we know about Money's experiment on Reimer comes from a 1997 Rolling Stone interview in which the then anonymous Reimer, along with other members of his family, recounted the trauma he suffered at the hands of Money. Here I'll draw extensively from that interview, alongside other sources. But beware, this story is not for the squeamish or faint-hearted. In 1965, David Reimer was born a healthy baby boy. He was born as Bruce to a working-class family in Winnipeg, Canada. He was one half of a pair of identical twins. At only 8 months old, both he and his brother Brian went into hospital to undergo a medical circumcision. But a tragic accident led to David, then Bruce's, operation being botched, leaving his genitals damaged beyond repair. His parents were, of course, distraught. They saw countless specialists, hoping to find someone who could help their baby. But the answer was always the same. Nothing could be done. It seemed as if Reimer was bound to live a difficult and painful life. That was until one evening when his parents were watching TV and saw a charismatic doctor talk about his pioneering work at a gender identity clinic in Baltimore. This Dr. Money even claimed that he could transform a boy into a girl. If what this doctor was saying were true, this could be their son's last chance at living something resembling a normal life, the Reimers thought. He could simply be turned from a boy into a girl. They reached out to Money and quickly received a response. At last, the Reimers had some hope, and Money had his perfect test subject. Unlike the intersex children Money had worked with before, the Reimer boys were born definitively male. And them being identical twins meant that Brian, the still healthy and intact Reimer boy, was the ideal comparison or control for Money's experiment. Finally, he could put his hypothesis about the malleability of sex and gender to the test. So, in 1967, the Reimers made their first trip to see Money in the US. From the get-go, Money insisted that Reimer would need surgery to construct female genitalia as quickly as possible. He believed that there was a gender identity gate, which would close once a child was around 2 years old, setting their gender in stone for the rest of their lives. With Reimer already 22 months old, his parents would have to act fast if they wanted a shot at a successful transition, Money told them. Eventually, the Reimers gave in and allowed their infant son to undergo surgery. And so began a lifetime of suffering and trauma. After his surgery, which constructed a cosmetic vagina, Reimer was renamed Brenda, And as per Money's instructions, no one outside of the immediate family was to know about Reimer's complicated medical situation. Even his twin brother was led to believe that Reimer had been born a little girl all along. Reimer was discouraged from playing with his brother and his male friends, and was instead forced to wear dresses and play with dolls. Money believed that Reimer could only complete his transition into being a girl if he was fully socialized into a female gender role. For Money, as for the trans movement today, conforming to stereotypically masculine and feminine behaviours in large part defines whether you are male or female. But despite his parents' best efforts, Reimer always knew something was wrong. When he spoke to Rolling Stone as an adult, he said he had repeatedly rejected his mother's attempts to put makeup on him. He tore at the lacy girls' clothes she dressed him in, and he refused to play with girls' toys, preferring instead to play soldiers and build forts with his brother. When he was 11 years old, David Reimer even told a psychologist that he was terrified that something had been done to his genitals. It seems like deep down he remembered what had happened to him. Among the worst and most traumatic memories Reimer had from childhood were his annual visits to see Dr. Money in Baltimore. Both he and his brother were subjected to grueling so-called counselling sessions. These were incredibly disturbing. Money would ask the young twins probing sexual questions. He asked them about their desires and preferences, and showed them pictures of adults having sex. Money would even ask the twins to strip off their clothes and inspect each other's genitals, sometimes with as many as 5 or 6 of his colleagues watching. Sometimes Money would take pictures, and worst of all, he would occasionally ask the boys to pretend to have sex with each other in various positions while he observed them. The rationale for this was that children could only develop a sense of their gender by inspecting their own, and each other's, genitals, and by understanding their respective sexual roles, even at a young age. And if the twins refused to go along with all this, as they often did, Money would, according to Reimer, fly into a rage and scream at them until they did as he said. Things only got worse for Reimer as he approached the age of 8. Money began to insist on more surgeries to finish the construction of Reimer's cosmetic vagina. For Money, this was vital. He believed that Reimer's transition could only be completed once he underwent a total physical transformation. Naturally, Reimer was terrified of more surgeries and pushed back against Money whenever he could. He didn't feel like a girl and didn't want to feel like a girl. The thought of being trapped forever in an alien female body was a horrifying prospect to him, Reimer later recounted. But while Reimer was grappling with his identity, he had no idea that Money was spinning the experiment as an overwhelming success. Money was publishing papers about Reimer's supposedly seamless transition, claiming that he had become a happy and feminine little girl. Money was even hailed by his peers as having solved the age-old question of nature versus nurture. But the academics heaping praise on Money were unaware of just how wrong his theories had been proven, and of the awful extent of his patients' suffering. By the time Reimer was 12, he had been coaxed into taking estrogen, and the threat of more surgery was still hanging over him. In one incident, during an appointment in Baltimore in 1979, Reimer ran to the top of the clinic building and threatened to kill himself if he was made to see Money again. Thankfully, the adults in Reimer's life finally listened to him, and that was the last time he went to Baltimore. As Money's influence over them reduced, Reimer's parents and doctors also began to lose faith in the transition process. At age 14, Reimer stopped living as a girl entirely. One by one, the medical team around Money gave up trying to subject Reimer to any more surgeries. Eventually, even his parents grew tired of keeping up the ruse. In 1980, Reimer's father picked him up from his weekly psychiatrist appointment, drove him to get ice cream, and told him the truth about everything. By his 16th birthday, Reimer had changed his name from Brenda to David, was taking male hormones, and had had his breasts, which had developed while he was taking estrogen, surgically removed. Unfortunately, learning the truth about his sex did not help to ease Reimer's suffering. He tried to kill himself twice before the age of 21, but after a while, things did begin to look up for David. In 1990, he got married and adopted his wife's children. He even managed to get a job and live some semblance of a normal life. It was during this period that the truth about Dr. Money's experiment came to light. Milton Diamond, an academic rival of Money's, had long been attempting to debunk the Reimer experiment. Diamond had managed to track down Reimer's former psychiatrist, Keith Sigmundson, and, together with the Reimer family, they managed to set the record straight. In 1997, Sigmundson and Diamond published a paper debunking Money's findings and revealing the true story of what happened to Reimer. Large parts of the scientific community suddenly realized that what Money had done was wrong, but this realization came too late for Reimer and his family. In 2002, David Reimer's brother, Brian, overdosed on antidepressants. A short while later, David's wife asked for a divorce, and in 2004 he ended his own life too. He was 38 years old.
The final chapters of David Reimer's latest book are left unfinished. His conflicted life cut short last week by a tragic suicide.
Thus, Dr. John Money, the father of the gender identity movement, destroyed the lives of an entire family, and the sinister ideology he pioneered continues to destroy lives today. Decades after the tragedy of David Reimer proved Money's theories utterly wrong, our institutions are still promoting them as unassailable truths. Confused children and young people are still being sacrificed on the altar of gender ideology, as adults in positions of authority encourage them to undergo unnecessary and life-altering medical treatments. Trans activists may want to ignore Money. After all, his experiment reveals the absurdity and horror that gender ideology has unleashed. But we can't let his experiments be wiped from public consciousness. What Money did to David Reimer and his family should be a stark lesson. Sex is not malleable, gender ideology is dangerous, and the origins of the trans movement are truly, truly sinister.